That was the big question in this past year for me that I
Yeah.
struggled with. I did leverage AI a little bit to help with that. If I have this combination of credentials and I'm looking in this particular geographic region and I'm looking at this size of a business, and this is what I'm offering. Well, these are the components of my packages. What can you find out there that tells me what might be a fair price to charge? But also then I can see, is that a price that's viable for my business? So I leveraged it for that, right? To kind of do that research and see what comes up, because there are sort of two different places where I have networks. I have networks here in Northeast Ohio, but I also have them back in Southern California where I used to live. So those are two very different economic environments. Not something you can just set one price and hope they both will pay it. But the other piece was getting the mentorship on crafting business plans and all the financials like profit and loss and balance sheets and cash flow. Going through that process with a mentor, I learned what's that bottom line that I can actually live on and the business can live on.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets, the podcast where we talk with successful career coaches on how they built their success and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm the founder of Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, and even $100,000 weeks. Before Purple Circle, I've grown several 7- and 8-figure career coaching businesses myself, and have been a consultant at 2 career coaching businesses that are doing over $100 million each. Whether you're an established coach or building your practice for the first time, you'll discover the secrets to elevating your coaching business.
Welcome to Career Coaching Secrets Podcast. I'm Kevin, and today we're joined by Valerie Polunas. She's the founder of Flowing River Conflict Solutions, been a coach for 2+ years. Welcome to the show, Valerie.
Thank you so much. I feel very welcomed.
Something I always love asking about on this podcast, right? One of the first questions I always ask is the origin story, because you know what? You could have been, I don't know, a Christmas decorator. You could have been a sushi chef or something like that. But out of all things that you chose, right? You chose coaching. And not only that, you chose to turn into a business. So yeah, what made you want to become a coach and turn it into a business?
What's interesting, I was talking with a former colleague and friend of mine. It was shortly after I had quit the job I had. And I quit for reasons of stress and health and things like that. So I was taking some time to reflect, and we were having a conversation. And she said to me, well, have you ever thought about becoming a coach? Because I've always noticed that ability in you. You've always done those kinds of things for the team, even if you didn't realize it. And I hadn't really thought about it before she nudged that, right? And the nudge got me looking into it. But what really made me decide to go ahead and actually become a coach was realizing with the business that I was starting, I focus on conflict management and prevention, and skills training is great. A lot of people just don't have the skills, right? But it doesn't cover everything. There are plenty of times in my career where I've seen people try to do the skills training, but it doesn't do anything for them. And I was looking for that missing piece. And when I started to really look into it, I realized coaching is it. Coaching's that piece that's going to really help me reach these teams and help these folks actually work through the difficult dynamics that can come with conflict.
That's really interesting. You talk about conflict management, conflict resolution. So who are kind of like the people coming up to you being like, hey, I need help with this?
Well, in the beginning here, it's been all sorts of people. I worked with couples. I worked with some co-founders who actually knew each other for years, but were kind of like oil and water to a degree in terms of their personalities. I've worked with some nonprofit leadership teams. So it's been a range. I've also worked with full-on private corporate teams as well. And my focus now, as I've been growing the business and growing as a coach, I'm really focusing my energy towards work teams, because I have experience personally having been a project manager and having been a part of a team over my career, where the folks really trying to get the work done can really get tripped up by conflict, and they need that kind of help sometimes to be more productive, to really just trust one another better. And so that's really where I'm putting my focus.
That's really interesting. Did that kind of come through experience? You were just helping, were you just noticed through coaching people, or did you how did you discover the people that you wanted to coach, I guess? You explained your history, but I'm kind of curious about how.
Yeah, I think like any new coach, when you're trying to get those 100 hours, it's sort of like, I'll take anyone. But that's dangerous, right? In terms of business, plenty of people have said, like, you can't say you'll work with everybody, right? I think I was really vacillating between working with couples actually
Mm,
versus working more in workspaces because I enjoyed that work, but that felt to me a little bit more too close to therapy. And I think that there are folks who are better suited to that than me. And when it came to figuring out which area I really wanted to deal with in terms of work teams, I had initially wanted to work with higher ed. That's where I come from. And with nonprofit teams, things have been really rough in the past year for those two fields. So I sort of had to pivot. I kind of became a business essential to pivot more towards the corporate sector and towards those kinds of work teams. And again, I just with that background that I had going through the
mhm,
experience I went through, it felt to me like, yeah, I could work with executives, right? I could work with a high level leadership team, but the people really just trying to get the work done day to day and
mm,
make those executives successful are the people that don't always get the attention, but
mm.
they're really how the business runs. So that's where I wanted to put my energy.
Something unique about like running your own business too, right? Because obviously you're doing all the business development as well. People need to find you. You have to do some sort of marketing, right? And so I guess like what type of marketing have you experimented with and how are people finding you?
Sure. So I've referrals, been doing that a little bit more than I used to, especially because I realized with coaching, people genuinely need to get to know me as a person to actually work with me. I'm not a product, right? So it's they have to be comfortable with who I am. And that's the best way I've found to get my name out there. It's really how I found most of my business so far because I have people who said, "Hey, I've had this great experience with her, or I know her on a deep level, and this would be a great fit for you."
Mm,
But I haven't rested there. I've definitely leaned heavily on digital marketing, so social media, particularly LinkedIn. I've started to dabble in YouTube and do video, and I'm getting more into that now as we're getting into this next year and moving more into email marketing and newsletters and things like that as well. But the podcast piece, I've done a few of those. I would say publications are still an area where I wanted to explore too, just trying to get my name into the spaces where, in particular, HR leaders, which tend to be the in for me, where they are looking for help and for information.
yeah. You know what's really interesting? You mentioned referrals, right? Did that come from your previous like work history or like previous career and stuff? Or like how did you build up this referral network?
Sure. I mean, some of it was people from the past. There's some of were just people I was starting to network with here where I live, and it kind of happened organically. I did though learn a little bit more about how to do it way more strategically through a SCORE workshop. I don't know if folks are familiar with SCORE business mentors, but I attended a workshop where someone talked about how to very deliberately set up that network, and so that's something that I'm in the process of doing now to make it something that I think will yield more than it has so far.
Yeah. And do you notice like any downsides of referrals? Because I know a lot of coaches, they love referrals because they're warm, right? But at the same time, you can't really, what I've noticed, I guess, through this podcast is like, you can't really control the lead flow with referrals because it's like, when are you going to get them? It depends, right? Sure, you can ask, right? On a cadence, but sometimes it just feels like it's hard. Have you experienced any of those things or challenges?
I would say that is the drawback. I've
Mhm.
worked in learning and development for over 20 years. And even with that, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
It's a long sales process for that and for coaching. And I think referrals are part of that, right? Because you're right. I think you're hoping that person will think of someone immediately and immediately refer them and get the ball rolling, but it doesn't always happen. I think the other piece, and some of this is on my end too, getting more targeted, but if they don't really know who you're looking for, they'll send anybody your way, and that they might not be the most viable lead for you to
Yeah.
really be the right thing and the right fit. And then, of course, I'm the kind of person in general who's going to say, I'm not the right fit for you. This person would be better, or coaching's not what you need. You need this other element, right?
Mm.
But that can be the drawback too, is you just get leads that don't really make sense for your business.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, like, okay, so you're doing this LinkedIn thing, you're getting some referrals, you're getting YouTube leads and all that sort of stuff too, right? And so I'm sure people are finding out about you, Valerie, and they're like, hey, like, how do I work with you, right? And so I'm kind of curious, what does a coaching engagement look like with you? What are your offerings look like? Is it mostly like one-on-one? Is it mostly like group trainings? Like kind of, yeah, I would love to kind of hear your offerings.
Sure. Yeah. So I try to package it in a way that makes sense to my audience, right? To HR leaders and what they typically would see, say, from training providers. And that means packaging them almost like programs. And what I have different levels for them. It's either, is your team experiencing what would be considered a conflict management situation, right? It's really hot right now and that needs to be settled. Or are you in more of a phase where nothing really big or bad is happening, but you want to prevent that stuff down the road? So there's those two options. I also have, and those are typically the team based options, though I do have one-on-one coaching available as well, because this other pathway that I have is a leadership pathway. And that's really if they see that they've got managers, that they have leaders who, if they get the coaching, whether it's on the management side or the prevention side or both, that they're going to be able to make a real change for their team. So they can go in those different levels in terms of how severe their situation is, but also like, are they looking to have their whole team or their whole organization coached or just an individual leader here or there?
I see. That's really interesting. It sounds like you have like an ER service where like, oh my God, we're having this huge thing or kind of like a preventative type of service as well. And then you have your one-on-one. That's really interesting. I'm going to assume, are you currently like a one-person team right now? Or like, how do you manage all of this at the moment?
That's a good question,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, I am a one-person team right now. The goal is to have some way to at least contract out some of these things over time. It is tough. I would say that the biggest thing I've learned is having willing to ask for help, right? Even if I don't have the funds to go with very expensive resources, I've reached out to people. I've found the free or affordable resources. And sometimes it's in my own network to educate me on the areas of the business that I'm maybe not as well informed on. And that's really helped in the past year, going through SCORE mentors. And I even have a business mentor through the bank that my business works through. So I've gotten a lot of help with the financial side, with the marketing side. And I think the more skilled I get at these different aspects, the different hats you have to wear, the easier it gets. But I'm also trying more and more to incorporate AI. I feel like that's probably something every coach is trying to do at this point, just to free up a little bit more of the time that would have been spent on basic admin so that I've got more time to actually coach, right? And to go and find the business as well. But it's not easy as a solo person for sure.
Speaking about AI, I think some interesting things about AI. Some people use it on the fulfillment side. Other coaches I know, they're using it to like kind of hash out their pricing. And one of the things I like talking about on this podcast are kind of like, I don't want to call it taboo, but like something I've noticed is that people don't really openly talk about like their thoughts about pricing or pricing strategies. And so what I've noticed, a lot of coaches, they struggle with like, well, what do I charge? How do I package this? How do I find out that initial number to charge as well? And of course, Valerie, you don't have to give any hard numbers, but how do you think about like pricing and structuring today? How do you structure it? And are there any key lessons that kind of shape that perspective for you?
Sure. I would say that's something that was the big question in this past year for me that I struggled with. Because I definitely discovered, I'm undercharging and I've really got to make a change. I did leverage AI a little bit to help with that. Kind of asked it, if I have this combination of credentials and I'm looking in this particular geographic region and I'm looking at this size of a business, and this is what I'm offering. Well, these are the components of my packages. What can you find out there that tells me what might be a fair price to charge, but also then I can see, is that a price that's viable for my business? So I leveraged it for that, right? To kind of do that research and see what comes up. Because there are sort of two different places where I have networks. I have networks here in Northeast Ohio, but I also have them back in Southern California where I used to live. So those are two very different economic environments. Not something you can just set one price and hope they both will pay it. But the other piece was getting the mentorship on crafting business plans and all the financials like profit and loss and balance sheets and cash flow. Going through that process with a mentor, I learned what's that bottom line that I can actually live on and the business can live on. And that informed things as well. And then I also just did my own research with coaches and coaching companies in the area to see what they're charging for certain things. And that gave me an idea between all three of those things.
Yeah.
What is actually viable for me and also hopefully going to be competitive. And I mean, at this point, it's still going to require testing it out, right? Whether I get a yes or a no. But that's been important. And also understanding how to incorporate things like discounts or freebies here or there depending on what type of customer it is to entice them in.
Now, you kind of mentioned something like, oh yeah, this was kind of the theme of something you had to figure out. And I'm sure it was kind of a growing pain. And so what I'm also curious about is like in this current season of your business right now, maybe you're still going through that. But what are some other growing pains that you're kind of noticing right now? Is there anything that's unexpected?
This one I think is going to be a growing pain regardless of the stage of my business. I obviously own a business, but I'm also a caregiver, and I'm in that sandwich generation where I'm taking care of a kid and I'm helping out taking care of a parent. So my business, I can't really run, 70 hours a week like a typical entrepreneur in their startup phase. So I've had to be really thoughtful about how I use my time because I don't have that kind of time, and I don't always have the energy or the focus that needs to be there at the exact time that it might need to be there. So I've just had to be really strategic in my choices and be really thoughtful about how I'm using my time with the business and how I find that balance. So that's I think been and will probably continue to be something that I have to think about over time. I think it's just the nature of it. And
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade it for anything, but it does make it complicated, and it's forced me to really have to reframe what success looks like for an entrepreneur, because what I'm bringing in and the scale and the time and the pacing that I'm bringing in is not going to look like somebody who made six figures in 6 months.
Yeah.
But that's okay. And I
Yeah.
think I would say that for any other coach out there who might be in similar circumstances. It's just really important to reframe for yourself what success means, because it's not going to look like folks with more bandwidth.
Yeah, as I think about that too, because, you mentioned that you are in the sandwich generation, right? And so I know that you're taking care of your like a parent and also a child as well. And so I'm kind of curious though, if we were to throw that to the side, how about your own ambitions? You have, I guess, ideally, if you didn't have those constraints, if let's say they're magically taken care of, right?
Mm,
Where would you want this coaching business to take you in the next few years? Do you have any desires to scale, hire more people, secret ambitions people don't know about, no one knows about, but
I think for me, so far for me, being a solo business is fine. Obviously, like I said, I think contracting out some of the more administrative things makes sense. Theoretically, I could grow it to a point where I'm hiring other people on. I have lots of ideas, and I do try to give some time to them here or there just to keep them going. But they're things that are the business is not in a place where I can do them yet. I have started working on this is sort of not coaching, but I have started working on a game that is designed to particularly help young people understand what has gotten our culture so polarized, and what some, not just some skills, but some sort of mindsets and behaviors that could help them turn into depolarizers and actually take an active role in changing the way that our political landscape is, but just the cultural landscape too. So I've been working on it, but I'm at a place where manufacturing and distribution is a thing. And I'm like, I have enough to do right now as that entrepreneur. That's something down the road that if I can get big enough and have the means to do it, that's definitely on the horizon. And there's some other things I'd love to do around that, of just meeting with people and doing something like a podcast, I guess, but meeting with people and having conversations together around food, because food is just a cool thing that brings people together. And what I know in my field and in the research is that if you find something that people can gather around or do together, it's not politics, it's not the divisive stuff, and they get to know each other on a deeper level, then you can ask the tough questions and you can have the more difficult conversations. So those are things that are they're there and they get some attention, but they're definitely down the road, and I can't wait to get to that point where I can do those.
there's something so magical about finding a commonality where it brings people together like food, right? And so I find that like when I talk about YouTube stuff or like talk about just general business concepts, people always love food analogies because we can always relate to a really great meal, a home cooked meal and stuff like that too. So yeah. But I have seen some controversial food takes too, is a sandwich, right? Like, like those type of things too, right? Yeah. They're like, no, it's not. Yes, it is. And then, yeah. Hey, maybe
What a
that's your
great-
next niche.
place to get your practice of having a difficult conversation, right? Because what are the stakes talking about hot dogs as a
Exactly.
sandwich? They're pretty low,
Yeah.
right?
It's
Yeah.
pretty low. It's pretty funny though. It's funny, like a few years during COVID back in the day, I remember being in this lobby. It was during the Clubhouse days. Do you remember that app Clubhouse where people would just
Yeah.
audio talk? Honestly, I was so fascinated because these people were arguing over like, is a hot dog a sandwich? And people would go on stage and just argue. It's funny.
It's a
But
huge
anyways,
memory for you. Wow, that really stayed.
pretty funny. Yeah. But okay. Cool. It sounds like you have quite a bit. You would like to do a podcast, you like to launch this game, and then also theoretically grow your coaching practice too. I guess what I'm also curious about too is like, okay, but that's like an ideal world, right? But like, I guess given your situation right now, what are some things that you love to do over the next year? I'm kind of curious about that.
Over the next year, I think the focus is really going to be on expanding marketing beyond what I do now and really giving sales the attention that it needs because I was kind of hoping for referrals before, but being more active with that, I think is going to be beneficial. And, we spoke about AI and finding more ways to lean into that strategically, I think are going to be important for the business. But as a
Mhm.
coach, I'm really excited about just growing the coaching muscle, right? And building more community locally here with other coaches. I've joined my local ICF chapter, love ICF Cleveland. Shout out to them. And I've got my community from my certification program as well. And I think it's would be great to really just get to know them more and see how we can support each other because
Mm,
this is definitely, especially as a solo business, can't do it alone. And coaching teams, I definitely can't do it alone if they get to the numbers that they're likely to get to. Sometimes you have to have a co-coach. So that's really important to me from a business standpoint, a coaching standpoint, but also just to build community. I think it's really important anymore to have that and engage with other people and connect with other people. So those are my short-term goals here for the next year.
yeah. Okay. Cool. I want to move on to this next segment. I call it underrated. And right
Ooh.
now, this season, we're focusing on business investments because I think you mentioned earlier that you had a mentor who helped you structure your pricing earlier and stuff like that too. And as business owners, coaches and stuff, like we invest into a lot of things. Some people invest into like marketing. Some people invest into their own training or learning, right? Or other coaches. Some people invest into team members too, right? A million things we can invest in. But I'm kind of curious, based off your experience so far, what's been the most, I don't know, overrated business investment you made so far? And what's the most underrated business investment?
I would say underrated. And I don't necessarily think that this might be to other coaches out there, but I think maybe to the rest of the world, it's really super important was getting my ICF credentials in being an associate certified coach, but also an advanced certified coach in team coaching, because it's really important, I think, to the field itself that there's some kind of basis of evaluation, that there's a standard, and that can translate really well to my customers, right? To know that I have been vetted, I've been verified, I continue to learn and be supervised and hold myself to this level of standard. So I would say that tends to be underrated sometimes because I've met some folks over the last few years who say they're never going to bother with that, or they've had it but they've let it lapse. And I'm sure they have great reasons. And maybe I'm early in this, and I'll think differently later on. But I really do think it's important for the profession to have this. Overrated, I guess I would say overrated was probably a lot of the marketing folks that approached me. I get stuff in my DMs all the time. It's kind of gotten a level of annoying. Probably every couple of months, I put out a stop it message out there. I would say overrated or just sort of the make X amount of dollars in this short period of time.
Yeah.
And because I've talked with a few folks, I've never pursued it. Just because, like I said, with my circumstances, it's just not feasible. I know what would be required to get there like that. And I just think there's so many people now who are offering what seems like an easy way out. And I just don't think that necessarily is viable. I think it's a good sell. I don't know that it actually works for everybody. And I'm a big believer in slow and steady, right? And
Mm,
building the right foundation for the business and for my coaching. And I've had the privilege of having a lot of folks in my network already who've helped me with these things for free or for very low fees because I worked in continuing education and workforce upskilling for a very long time. I know folks in digital marketing. I know folks in project management and all these other areas. So I have that advantage, I guess. So I can see how other people would think to invest in that when I myself find it overrated.
As you're mentioning that, I kind of imagine, because I get the same DMs. I think a lot of us get all the same DMs, right? The cold outreach DMs and stuff. And you mentioned, oh yeah, it's a good sell, but in my mind, I was like, is it a really good sell? To be honest with you, like, I don't know, for any sophisticated buyer that like, you can't really control that to you, which is so insane sometimes. So anyways, that's my way of kind of agreeing with you as well. Last question for you. How do people find you and connect with you, Valerie?
Sure. Well, they can find me through my website, which is www.flowingrivercs.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, so you can look me up at Valerie Polunas. And then on YouTube, it's Flowing River Conflict Solutions. You can find me there as well. I'm sure if you Google search me, you'll get the Google business profile. Lots of different ways you can find me. I'm also, I go out and I do some other events as well. So for folks in the Northeast Ohio area, I'm at chamber events on the east side and SHRM events as well. So that's how folks can reach me.
Yeah. As I'm looking through, fun fact, Valerie, I used to be a drug dealer. I used to be a pharmacist. And I'm looking through my really bad handwriting, by the way, as I was taking notes on our podcast. But it was actually really cool listening to your story. And personally, I'm like really, really into conflict management. And maybe you weren't a sushi chef. Maybe in a next life, you could have been like an FBI hostage negotiator or something like that. But, it's really interesting. You're mentioning the games for the youth, and we didn't go deep into it, but the work that you're doing is so impactful with conflict management. And I feel like everyone can really benefit from it. But not only that, right? I think what really stuck out to me was like, what's going on behind the scenes of running a business too. Sometimes it gets lost. Like, we see everyone's like Instagram highlights of like, oh yeah, I made X amount of dollars or everything is going super, super well. But then you also like highlighted some of the growing pains, which I think is so, so valuable for our fellow coaches listening to this. And so that's my really long way of saying, Valerie, honestly, your work matters. I appreciate your work. And thank you for just sharing your time, your wisdom, your stories on our podcast today. So thank you so much, Valerie.
And thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what I do and give people an idea that type of coaching is out there, that they can definitely access it, because the more people in the world that can navigate conflicts effectively, the better it's going to be for everybody. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Career Coaching Secrets. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this episode to catch future episodes. This podcast was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help career coaches scale their business to $100,000 years, $100,000 months, or even $100,000 weeks, all without burning out and making sure that you're making the impact and having the life that you want. To learn more about our community and how we can help you, visit joinpurplecircle.com.